So the last couple of episodes of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon has been showing us a lot of flashback scenes that I haven't talked about too much, but I do actually want to get into, a lot of the last ones that we've seen here because we actually, I think, have a lot of different characters here. I think we're seeing Daryl's dad, and also I believe that Merle could also be there as well. So yeah, before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. Now, in the latest episode of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, in episode 5, we actually do see a little bit of a flashback again, and it looks like we're seeing Daryl's dad as well. If you're actually looking at the shots here, like there's this one shot here of, I believe this has to be Daryl's dad, just because it's somebody that I think is, younger, definitely, not like a teenager, I would say, definitely probably an adult. And because we're seeing, two others that I do believe are Merle and Daryl, I think that that's just kind of what we're getting here. I do think that this character right here is likely Merle, and this character here is Daryl, and this character here is Daryl's dad. And so I do think that a lot of the flashbacks that we are getting here are likely gonna, play a big role in the finale. I just don't see it happening in episode 6 because of what's happening there. There's so much happening in that episode that it just makes way more sense to me that the finale is going to explore a lot of this. Now, I'm interested in like the context of everything for sure. Like Daryl's been thinking about this a lot, it seems like, the last however long he's just been thinking about, I guess what happened here. And maybe it's because he's on his own and he wants to go home. And so the feeling of like, being on your own, I guess like in a different place, like you're trying to go home, right, is reminding him of when he was younger. And if you remember on The Walking Dead, like they told the story of, Daryl, I guess, going lost for 9 days after his mom died. And so I'm wondering if we're seeing something like that here where, we're going to see how Daryl gets lost for however long. There's a lot of stuff like with Daryl, getting the scars on his back and everything. Like there's a lot of stories there that we could honestly see in this, origin story in a sense, because like, I think that seeing a lot of this, it is interesting, first of all, if they're actually giving us a lot of flashbacks. I'm really interested in knowing, like, could they do this again in the future? Like, will they do that with Rick Grimes if he returns, right? Like, see some stuff from, like, when he was younger or whatever, right? Like, I think that'd be kind of cool. Just, a lot more story with the characters, sort of flesh out a lot of the characters that we, know so well. I think that it would be really cool. I think that's why the flashback scenes here with Daryl are really interesting because it's, first of all, I will say I wanted this with Carol in season 2. I think that would have been really great. Like she was going through a lot of stuff with Sophia, and I think that was like the perfect opportunity to explore a lot of, her, I guess, as a mother, I guess, beforehand with Sophia, before the apocalypse started, and, what it was like with Ed and like just all of that there, and seeing how far she's come from all of that, right? Like I just think that it would be really cool to see Carol, just a backstory of just anything with her from like before the apocalypse. And I think that was definitely a missed opportunity in season 2, especially because season 2 was so much about Carol trying to find Daryl and just like that feeling of like, she was trying to find Sophia before too, and being scared of all of that and just everything there. I think that honestly, like they really could have explored that a lot more there, but it is what it is. They could obviously do that at some point in the future. Maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe it's one of those things where they sort of already explored a lot of that with Carol, right? Like, she's seen a lot of growth, since, she was with Ed, and like, she's probably one of the most transformed characters on the show. If you're considering just, her start in season 1 all the way until now, right? So, and I will say with Daryl, there hasn't been a lot of like character development. Well, obviously in this show there has been, but like before this show, there really wasn't a lot of character development with him in a while. Like I think that Leah, I believe her name was, like I literally forgot what her name was, but she was a really awesome character, I think, for Daryl. And before that, I'm just trying to think of really when Daryl's character development kind of slowed down a lot. And I feel like obviously after Merle's death, I still think things were building up for the character, especially when Rick was like, you're my brother, Daryl, right? Like a lot of that was really good for the character. And I think that there was some stuff after, but eventually I think by the time we got to All Out War, a lot of stuff changed where he just became the Daryl that we know. And I think that was the really cool thing about this spinoff specifically, is that we're learning so much more about him. Like his grandfather was mentioned in season 1. There's just so much about the character. Obviously what was happening with Isabel in season 2, Laurent, and just like everything here with the flashback. Like this is really amazing for Daryl, I would say. Now, as for Merle, I do believe that this is Merle here. And so it's kind of cool to see Merle, like if it actually is him. I'm pretty sure it is, though. Like, obviously it's recasting because, I mean, Michael Rooker can't play, the kid version of Merle. So it's cool to see this scene. I do hope that the actual scene that we have eventually, it isn't like blurred like this. I think that that's my only concern about this right now, is that eventually when we actually see the whole scene play out here, I'm sure it's going to happen in the finale, that it's going to be blurred like this and really fast. And like, that's something I really don't want to see. I want it to be just like normal. And we're seeing like, maybe it's a 4 or 5 minute scene, right? Where Daryl and Merle are just like talking about whatever. And then something happens and obviously their dad shows up and it just like tells this whole story or whatever. Like, I want to see something like that. I think, if it is blurred like this and it's just, I honestly would be really disappointed in that, because I want to see more of Daryl's origin story, right? Like, I think that's the thing. He's mentioned Merle a lot over the years, but I do think seeing Merle, like actually come back to the story in some way here is just going to be really exciting for a lot of people. And, it is kind of funny if you think about it. Like, I do wonder if there are people that are just watching The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon for the first time and like, haven't really watched The Walking Dead. Like, if there are people that are just like starting with this, I imagine it's not that many, right? But I do think that it would be really interesting to see, I guess the people that have just started watching it from this spinoff and like their perspective of like, how much do you really know about Daryl and all that? Because a lot of this is explained in the, original series, but I don't know who's going to go back and watch the original series. I mean, obviously it still holds up to this day, right? But it's not like the latest show coming out. And so I'm just curious as to, a lot of the people that have been watching for many years. And there's also, I think, I just think a lot of people forgot about, just what happened to Daryl in the past, because I even kind of forgot some of the details of the story, right? I know Merle was shocked by a couple of things. And so I wonder if that is worked into the story here a little bit, where Merle is like, well, you got to do this or whatever. Or maybe we see Merle just take off and then he just like leaves Daryl there. And then, that sort of plays into, I think that was a scene in season 3 where Merle was kind of shocked by like the scars that Daryl had on his back, right? Like, I'm curious as to how Merle is going to play a role here. If it is him, I believe it is him though. How he's going to play a role into this flashback, because obviously there's something there in terms of the character abandoning Daryl and just leaving him to be on his own. And, it's really interesting when you really look at Merle and Daryl's relationship overall. Like, he really almost like, he just looked up to his brother forever. And it obviously wasn't the smartest thing, but it was just sort of all he had, right? And it's interesting to look back on like the first couple of seasons of The Walking Dead. And honestly, it makes me want to go back and watch season 3 again, like, or at least the scenes with Daryl anyways, because Daryl really gets mad at Merle, right? About a lot of the stuff that happened when they were younger. And so seeing that here, I think would be really cool, right? Like having that flashback with the characters, I think, right? Just to have that whole backstory, I think worked out, I think would be really incredible. So I'm excited for that. I can't wait to see more of this. I do wonder if we are going to be seeing a lot more of this, though. Like, again, first of all, I do think this is going to be happening in the finale because it just makes a lot of sense. But I really do wonder if we're going to see a lot more flashbacks like this, because I was talking about, we could have saw Carol, obviously, in season 2. I think that there was a lot there they could have done with Carol. But, like, if Rick Grimes does return, are we going to see a flashback there? What about in Dead City? Like, they could totally do, flashback scenes with those characters in Dead City. It's stuff that people really do like, like with Maggie, that would be really interesting. Like if you actually saw Maggie's mother, right? And like what happened there and just like, her, I guess, younger on that farm and like what life was like. I don't know how you would, recast Herschel. I don't think you could. And so there's a lot of things there in terms of how you actually do that. But like just being at the farm again, I think would be so cool to see. Like that's what you want to see in like a Maggie spinoff, right? Is like flashbacks to the farm in season 2. That would be so incredible to see. So I'm hoping that, a lot of this here, at least the positive reception to this Daryl origin story or flashback, is something that inspires Scott Gimple or other showrunners to work on this more in the future. And yeah, because this is just really incredible. I do hope that we get a lot more of this. But anyways, I'm going to leave it here. Definitely post your thoughts down below. Do you think we're going to get this in the finale, or do you think this is going to be something that, is maybe saved for season 4? Because I am wondering if this is going to be a season 4 thing, because it does feel like, I mean, first of all, I think we will get it in the finale. I'm pretty confident, but like, what if this is just build up to like something that maybe doesn't even get revealed this season, and then in the finale, in season 4, we see more of that, right? Like there's an actual scene there, because I'm trying to think of like why this is going to matter in the finale. If all that stuff is happening with like, maybe, El Alcazar attacks Salaz del Mar, and they go back there and like just all of that, like, why would Daryl think about, the past and everything? Like, why would all of that come up, So I'm just curious as to how this is all going to play out. But I do think after we watch episode 6, we're going to know a lot more there. Like, this is how it's all going to build up. And like, you never know, like a big character could die in episode 6, right? Like Roberto or Justina. So we'll have to wait and see how this all builds up to the finale. But I do think after episode 6, we're going to know a lot more as to how all of this, I guess is going to play out. So anyways, I'm going to leave it here. Definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.